position to Max Verstappen, Red Bull Honda. Congratulations to him, very well deserved. He was quickest in free practice today in Abu Dhabi and put together a beautiful lap. As he crossed the line, Christian Horner said, absolutely brilliant middle sector, Max. And for sure it was. I mean, every sector was brilliant. But it's interesting to look at the sector times around the Abu Dhabi circuit, because a lot of the pace of your lap and how competitive you were was based on how you used the tyres during that lap. The soft tyre came in very quickly and then went away very quickly as well. So if we dissect Max's pole lap, it's interesting to see that he was second quickest in the first and third sectors, but actually third quickest behind the two Mercedes in the second sector. And I think that's what Christian Horner was talking about, how close he was to the Mercs. Obviously that second sector has a massively long straight. When the corners came into play, the real corners towards the end, I say the real corners, I still love those very quick ones, turns 2, 3 and 4 in Abu Dhabi. But if we're talking about the corners that punish the tyre and reward downforce and grip, sector 3 is your area at Abu Dhabi. And there he was right on it. And it was a combination of those three compromised sectors that gave Max the pole. You could say it was almost perfect planning by Red Bull. I suspect that actually down in the pit lane and in the race car, it was just a question of driving this thing as quickly as we could once we knew we still had the tyre grip going into sector 3. So great job by Max. There was a lovely moment, a classic Max Verstappen moment, sort of karting heritage moment in Q1, right at the beginning of qualifying, when he said, I could have done a better lap, but my hand got stuck coming out of turn 6. And on the replay, you can see him sort of fiddling around his left hand. He got sort of out of sync with where his hand should be relative to where the steering wheel was. Classic Max to admit that and to allow us all to have a bit of a laugh at it. So really good job by Max. He, as I say, he was really good this morning. The Red Bull, obviously a great package around here. Under the heading of, this is not a circuit where you can just drive flat out for the complete lap and hope that the tyres are going to last. You've got to manage the tyres. This is the soft tyres on a qualifying lap, that is, to get the best from it. As we saw yesterday with Sergio Perez and the Racing Point Mercedes, you can put together a string of really good laps on the hard tyre. And of course, that's what, just as an aside, that's what Sergio, winner in Sakhir, will be hoping for tomorrow, because after an engine change yesterday, he now has to start from the back of the grid. It wasn't worth, therefore, Sergio stretching it in Q2 because he was never going to get a decent grid position, obviously. But in Q1, he hadn't got a lap time in early, but he was really quick. So who knows where Sergio would have been on the soft tyre, probably right up there in the top 4, I would guess. Anyway, getting back to the qualifying laps on the soft tyre of the other major players, Valtteri Bottas looked as if he had it about right. He was P3 in terms of where he was relative to Max and Lewis in sector 1. He was just behind them. He was starting to pick up the pace in the second sector. He was second quickest to Lewis in the second sector. And then in the third sector, with the tyres, really good grip, he was quickest of all. But it wasn't good enough to get him the pole. The pole came, as Christian Horner very astutely pointed out, by how quick relative to Bottas Max was in sector 2, in that area where the Red Bull Honda has been trimming away and is surprisingly quick in a straight line. Lewis Hamilton, purple in sector 1, purple in sector 2, almost looks as if the tyres had gone away for sector 3, and indeed he was P3 in sector 3. If he'd kept that pace up, obviously he would have been on the pole, but it fell away quite dramatically in sector 3 for Lewis. We'll give him that. He's been away for a little bit. He did actually say yesterday the cars felt a bit different. I mean, he would have to say that, wouldn't he? George Russell's been in it, doing something to my brakes, doing something to my setup. Indeed, Lewis put in a very good lap. And when he had grip, he looked amazing. I don't think Lewis has ever been the greatest racing driver in the world when it comes to a lap where you can't just drive the thing flat out and you have to plan and manage how you're going to use the tyres. It goes against his natural grain as a racing driver, and we saw it quite a lot, and we've seen it quite a lot in Sochi, where Valtteri and Nico Rosberg were always very good at getting the lap exactly right. And I think it was a similar situation here at Abu Dhabi. Lewis just gave it everything he had, and he was great to watch sectors 1 and 2, but sector 3, it was like, have I got enough grip, and what is going on? The tyres were starting to overheat, and that's why he qualified third. But he is, of course, on the clean side of the grid, and all three cars, Max and the two Mercedes, will be starting on the medium tyre. As we said yesterday, there was not a lot of difference in terms of overall pace between the soft and the medium. And look who's qualified P4 for McLaren at their last race with the Renault engine before they switched to Mercedes power for next year. Lando Norris, absolutely superb. He did use a soft tyre to get through into Q3, just to be sure, but a really good lap in Q3. Dissecting his lap, P5 in the first sector and then 2 P4s behind the Red Bull and the 2 Mercedes. So very consistent and very good tyre management, enough to outdo Alex Albon, who also, like Lando, had to use the soft tyre to get through into Q3, unlike Max, of course, who's on the medium tyre. He did about the same time as Max on the soft tyre in Q2, but in Q3 he was sort of flip side of Lando Norris. He was quite quick in Sector 1, over quick probably, using the tyres, overheating them a bit, and then for Sectors 2 and 3 he was slower than Lando in both of those sectors. So that's where Lando got it. More corners, more area on which to make up time if you have got grip in that Sector 3. And just to underline the point, that's where Lewis lost the pole. By the time he got to the all-important Sector 3, where there are all those corners, he didn't have the same grip level as a Valtteri Bottas or a Max Verstappen. But one of the most interesting qualifying laps of all, I thought, was Charles Leclerc. And again, we should say it's kind of meaningless because he's got a 3-place grid penalty as a result of his braking mistake in the Sakhir Grand Prix. But nonetheless, Charles on the absolute limit. And looking at his qualifying lap, you can almost see the way his brain was working. He didn't want to do a Lewis Hamilton and run out of grip in Sector 3, so he was actually only 8th quickest in Sector 1, taking it really easy on the tyres. Sector 2, he upped it a bit, bearing in mind the Ferrari engine isn't great in a straight line. He was 5th quickest overall in Sector 2. But in Sector 3, he ended up with 3rd fastest time of the day. Now that is very impressive for a Ferrari in any context, I think, and that will be an uplifting performance, I think, as they go into the close season for Ferrari, as they look at that sort of granular detail. Let's look at some of the margins between teammates. Always interesting on a circuit, a relatively clinical circuit like Abu Dhabi. 0.3, as I say, between Max Verstappen and Alex Albon. Well, it's about what you would expect, I guess. A similar margin for Carlos Sainz, having his last drive for McLaren, to his teammate Lando Norris. And also, interestingly, Pierre Gasly, he never really seemed happy, was 0.3 slower than his teammate at AlphaTauri, Daniel Kvyat. So good luck by Daniel. The biggest difference between teammates, sadly, was again at Ferrari on a day when you thought maybe Sebastian would have been a little bit uplifted by the grid penalty that Charles has, but Sebastian 0.7 slower than Charles Leclerc in Q2, and at the end of it saying, I gave it all I had, there was nothing more there. Now, whether that was a sort of subliminal message to everybody out there, I don't have the same car as Charles, and that's what we're supposed to assume from that, or whether it was, this is it, I've given it everything I had and Charles is really quick, I don't know, make your own mind up about that. Personally, I think it was another great qualifying lap by Charles Leclerc, and I think that for Sebastian Vettel and indeed for Racing Point, the team he's joining next year when it'll be rebranded Aston Martin, there's quite a lot of work ahead, because quite clearly Sebastian is not as fast as Charles Leclerc right now, and if you're going to make a new start, you're going to a team like that, you want to be hitting the ground running and going in as the fastest driver in the world, 4 times world champion. But anyway, that is for Sebastian to contemplate over the winter. Kimi Raikkonen was half a second slower than Antonio Giovinazzi, didn't make it out of Q1. And I've been saying this since he got in the car in Sakhir, but I thought Pietro Fittipaldi did a really good job. On the first run out there, when he and Kevin Magnussen were out first on the track, they were both doing clean laps on the soft tyre. And on that run, Pietro was only 0.1 slower than Kevin. Kevin went quicker in the second run. Pietro had a lock-up going into turn 1 and then got a bit of traffic and ended up 0.3 slower than Kevin Magnussen in the Haas Ferrari. But that is nothing, I think, about which he should be ashamed. Interestingly, this all happened on the 74th birthday of his grandfather, Emerson. Happy birthday, Emerson. Finally, Nicholas Latifi, 0.4 slower than George Russell, not helped by spinning as he was beginning his second run in Q1, trying to get the tyres hot, coming out of the last corner, just lost it. But George was never happy with the Williams. I suppose it's a bit of a culture shock, not culture shock, technical shock, coming from a factory Mercedes back to a Williams Mercedes, and George really just never got the tyres right. Tyres were the big talking point, how to get the temperatures right for the lap, as we've just been saying, and George pretty, I don't know what, frustrated afterwards that he never got the tyres right. They were running much too hot, he said, and for the first time in a while did not get out of Q1. So good qualifying session all in all. As Valtteri started his lap, they said, give it all you got, Valtteri. Max has been saying all weekend that he's going to give it the big send, as he would say, and he got it. He did it, and he got it with a great lap, which was in some ways a compromised lap, but they managed the tyres perfectly at Red Bull, and we would expect that. They're such a good team at running a race car on the ground. Great shame for Sergio Perez and Racing Point that his performance and speed hasn't been rewarded with any sort of decent grid position. Lance Stroll qualified 8th, not a bad lap, but in a car as good as that, you would have liked to have seen him qualifying a little bit higher. And for Charles Leclerc, it's going to be a torrid race right in the midfield, wanting to get away from it as quickly as possible. I'm trying to imagine what the opening lap is going to be like. I imagine Max is going to make a clean start. Valtteri may bog down a little bit on the dirty side of the grid. Lewis for sure will be cramping his style, but both Mercedes will be looking to try to get past the Red Bull early in the race, because it's not an easy circuit on which to overtake. And those earlier laps, when they're heavy with fuel, the Mercedes engine might just have a significant advantage over the Honda. But overall, Red Bull Honda have done a really good job of trimming that car out. Indeed, Alex Albon has been complaining for most of the running so far, either of understeer or no grip or the tyres going off. And I think that just underlines the job that Max Verstappen is doing in that car. It's not only a question of a clean lap and of putting those three sectors together in the right way. It's also a question of living with some of the foibles that come when you take away downforce from the car. And Max is doing that in a way that we can't really see from the outside, but for sure inside, this guy is doing a sensational job. And a final shout out to Mercedes, who put the names of about 2,000 employees who are behind the design, build and running of the Mercedes World Championship winning Grand Prix cars, the two cars that enable Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas to go racing on Sunday afternoon. That's 2,000 people. You can see their names there. Good job. Nice to see that. Equally, I'd just like to mention the passing of a friend of mine, Simon Arkless, who for many years was at Champion. He took over from John Glover, another very good friend of mine, and best wishes to John. But Simon passed away, great man, always a smile on his face, always full of energy, always full of his love of racing. We lost him today, but our thoughts are with him and with his family. One more round of the 2020 Formula One World Championship coming up tomorrow. That is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, early evening tomorrow, local time. See you after the race, and thanks for watching.